Stas Chernyshev. He is our former principal clarinet at Symphony and C. For at least around 5 years. I remember his audition. It was, phenomenal. Yeah. We probably heard a dozen or more clarinets, and he was clearly the one that won the position. Since then, he's won the job at Fort Worth Symphony, where he's principal clarinet, and he knows a lot about auditioning and doing it well, obviously. So I'm going to turn it over to Stas. Jocelyn and I will be here, kind of answer any questions anybody has. But yeah, take it away, Stas.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this introduction. I'll talk a little bit myself. So my name is Stas. If you have a questions, just call me Stas. It's totally fine. So I'm originally from Russia, from St. Petersburg, and I came to Kurdish when I was 19. So it was a big change for me. It was a huge move. I didn't speak English back then, so I pretty much learned my English when I came to the US. And I was already 19, so it was a little tricky. I remember that. But in a way, it helped with audition process. And I'm talking about not just orchestral auditions, but also school auditions, solo competitions. So I did a bunch of solo competitions before I came to Kurdish. And in a way, those things are similar in approach. And I will be talking today about how to prepare for auditions or competitions, and what to expect, how in advance you have to start preparing, what to look even before the audition starts, or your school audition or orchestral audition, or if you're preparing for a solo competition. So actually, it's funny that Symphony in C, I think, was one of my first orchestral auditions. So that's it's really memorable, and thank you for saying good words that I played well that day, and it was impressive, and I feel lucky being a member of Symphony in C for so many years. It was a truly great experience for me. So thank you for that. So right now I'm in Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, which is a full-time orchestra. We are playing around, well, at least 200 concerts a year, which is a lot of concerts. Before as I mentioned, I was at Kurdish for 5 years. Kurdish, as I mentioned, I didn't speak English really well my first year, so Kurdish was really accommodating and gave me an extra year to stay, which was great. So it helped me to figure out certain things about my future, about orchestra auditions, especially. Gave me a chance to study 1 more year with my teacher, Donald Montanaro, and my clarinet teacher. And after that, I applied for Ensemble Connect, which is a program of Carnegie Hall. I don't know if you guys know this program, but it's basically a fellowship based at Carnegie Hall. It's 20 musicians only, so it's quite small, and it's mostly dedicated to chamber music and teaching. So applying for Ensemble Connect, it's a little different type of audition that you would that an orchestra audition would be. So we'll be talking about that too. So right, let's talk about auditions, and let's start with well, let's start with number one thing that I didn't know. If you're considering orchestra auditions, you should find a way to find about them. So I actually didn't know where to find the information about the auditions. So if you're looking for orchestra auditions, there is one magazine that has all the information. It's a subscription magazine. It's called International Musician. So if you consider applying for orchestra auditions at some point, that's the magazine you probably should subscribe to. Most of the schools have a subscription to this magazine. And I know at Curtis, this magazine was in the library. So basically every single orchestra in the country is required to submit information about the audition in this magazine. If you look at other websites like Musical Chairs or anything else, they might not necessarily have the information about all the orchestras, but International Musician should have. So that's one of the things that I didn't know as a student at Curtis, and I remember I missed a few of important auditions this way. That I just missed them. I didn't know. So that's the first thing. If you're applying for schools, obviously pick the schools that you want, pick the teachers that you want to study with, and go on their websites, right? That's step number one. Just go into their website and looking for, you know, for a start. That's how you start. Well, the second step is to see what they actually require, right? So a lot of orchestras require an one-page resume. So one-page resume is literally just one page of information about you, and it's pretty simple. So mine looks. I don't know if you can see something like this. So you see, it's not a lot of information on this one piece of paper. So you have to be extremely clear what you put there. So it's always your name and email and phone number that goes on top. And with your name, it's good to include what instrument you play, right? So mine says on top, Stas Chernyshev, clarinetist, right? And then it has my address, email, and phone number, just right on the very top. And then depending where you're applying, so if you're applying for performance related jobs like orchestras or ensembles or anything, that you want to include all the experience on the very top of what you had. If you had any ensemble experience, if you had youth orchestra experience, if you had I don't know, any solo experiences playing with the orchestra or as a guest somewhere, that's where it should go. Usually, especially for orchestras, it's interesting. So I've not only auditioned for orchestras, but right now I've been on the other side where I would read resumes of people who apply for orchestral jobs, and you would not believe how many resumes we get. It's a lot of resumes. You get a pile of resumes, let's say 120, 30, 150, depends on the position. And it takes a long time to even go through them. So resumes that really clearly written are usually catch your eye right away. So just structuring them correctly and not including everything you did in your life, just the most important things in chronological order, is a really good start. So for orchestral auditions, I include experience on top. So there are a few sections. Then I include the schools I study with and competitions I won. That's it. You can also include music festivals. For schools, you would include education on top. So schools you went. So depending on where you apply, that resume can be changed a little bit, right? So always on the top is the most important part. So for performance jobs, it's performance experience. For schools, it's schools, right, or your education. If you apply for solo competitions and you had competition experience in the past, I would list competitions on the very top. For school auditions, they usually require some sort of form with your name, and they also would ask you to list what you would usually list on resume, which is your experiences as a performer, experiences as a musician in general, what experiences you had. So maybe the format will be different, but it's a good thing to have. You know, if you have this one-page resume, you can use it in many different ways, right? Applying for schools too, you can just grab the information from that resume and put in your school application. So that's one of the things I would start accumulating and thinking about. You can just start a Word document and just put most important informations that you've done. Let's say you play the soloist with an orchestra. Great, just write it down, put the date there, so it's there in your document. If you did a music festival, great, put it there. Like this Symphony in C summer camp goes there to your resume. Don't forget that it was in August 2020. It all goes to this one piece of paper here, right? And again, it's just one piece of paper, so I don't list everything I've done in my life or every concert I played, but it's what currently the most important things for you.
Right. And also, I might add, once you have this document once, it's very easy to update it. You know, you just have to, the hardest part is creating it. And then once
Yeah.
you have a template, then you say, wow, I did this thing, and maybe that's more important than this thing that I have on the bottom. I don't need that anymore. You know, you want to still keep it one page. So as you start getting experience doing these things, you know, your experience, the top section especially will start looking better and better. So some of the things that you did, you know, in the past, you know, you could start subtracting those as you feel like you don't necessarily need to keep them on there anymore. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I would also add one thing that this happened to me recently with one of my students where he applied to something and they asked him for a comprehensive repertoire list of solo music that he's played, chamber music that he's played, orchestral music that he's played. And you know, man, if you've been playing for a few years and doing a lot of stuff, it can be crazy to try to go back and think about like, wait a minute, what have I done in all my lessons and all my orchestras? So that's another thing. If you're keeping documents, I would start one of those too. That's unrelated to auditions, but it will save you a lot of time if you sort of just keep these documents going as you do things.
Right, you typically won't need that document for like an orchestral audition, like Stas is saying. They kind of assume that if you are applying for a professional job, that you have a lot of repertoire in under your belt. But you know, you know, for things for students, probably for everyone's age, that's a part of this meeting and a part of the camp. That's definitely something that is worth keeping.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember when I started creating my repertoire list, it took me days and days and days because, you know, I played a lot of different pieces, and just to put it all in one document, it took forever. So yes, if you can start it early on, it would be really beneficial. Um, so yeah, that's about that is start for me. That's the start of any audition, is to have all your documents in check, and you can start early on by creating those. You know, you can definitely put together a repertoire list. You can put a resume together, and you know, it's like I remember when I started my first resume. Oh, it was so. I mean, I didn't know where to start. It was so difficult. So what I did, I asked um, friends. I asked friends who were older than me, who already had experience doing those or had already resumes. if they can send me theirs as an example. And that was the easiest start I remember. I was just looking at those resumes, and I was like, okay, now I know exactly how they're supposed to look like, what a good resume looks like, and what works, you know, especially if you're applying for competitive orchestras, competitive schools. You want your documents look good, you know, you want it to look professional. So if you have friends who succeeded in certain auditions or competitions, ask them for their resumes, ask them for their applications, if they're okay with that, if they're okay giving you that information. I was lucky enough to have good friends that they were like, okay, sure, just take a look at them. And it was eye-opening to see how complete they are, and at the same time simple. So if you have friends, especially older friends, I would totally ask them for an example, so you have a good starting point. All right, so that's a thing that took a long time, but I just wanted to emphasize that this is a part of any audition. This is a part of a process, and sometimes we think the audition starts where you get the music and start practicing like crazy, but actually the audition starts before that, with the correct preparation of your documents.
Right, and honestly, we do Symphony NC auditions every year, and I see hundreds of resumes every year, and sometimes, you know, we only have so much time to hear people. So we look at the resumes and we say, this person might be the best fit, or this person, but, you know, if the resume has less experience on it, or, you know, we might not have time to you know, to hear everybody. So this is really like your key to the audition. Like, this needs to look really, really good, and have to have your best, you know, you have to put your best foot forward before you even play a note. Because this is the thing that's probably going to earn you the audition, is the experience that you have.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I totally agree. And one more thing I would add, it's not particularly the resume part, but it's, if you apply for any position, doesn't matter if it's a school or orchestra, you want to make sure that you stay in touch with these people, meaning look at your emails. Usually a polite time to reply to emails, consider 2 days. So within 2 days, you want to reply to your email if you received from an orchestra. If you haven't heard, follow up, ask, have you received my email? Something like that. So staying in touch makes you look professional, makes you look like you care. And those two things, the documents themselves and staying in touch with the organization, are number one things when you start applying or preparing for something. So after you're done with it, okay, those it's all boring things, but just, you know, something to keep in mind for sure. So now you applied. Now the I guess exciting part is what is the list? What actually you're playing for your audition or competition, right? So usually every single orchestra, school, solo competition, they would list a repertoire list, right? And it's surprising how many times I missed something in that list. I would look at that list and I would be like, okay, I know this, and this looks familiar. But most of them, especially orchestras, they list really specific numbers of an excerpt they want to hear. And sometimes you look at I remember I played Firebird, Stravinsky's Firebird. And it has this a clarinet orchestra excerpt that basically every single audition would have. And I saw like Firebird, okay, I know what is that, I know exactly where it is. And that particular orchestra asked 10 measures before the excerpt, before that excerpt that I was practicing. And I showed up to an audition without ever playing those 10 measures before the excerpt started. And then they put the music on the stand, and I look at that and I was like, oh no. And it's hard, you know? So, and I have half an hour warm-up room to learn these 10 measures. And instead of practicing what I was supposed to do, maybe warm up a little bit or something, I spent all my half an hour practicing those 10 measures. So be really careful with the list. Sometimes it might look familiar, sometimes it might look really similar, and you're like, okay, I know exactly what they're talking about. But in reality, sometimes you need to be careful with what's on the page. The same for solo competitions. Sometimes they list the exact edition of the music, so you want to look into those too, right? So if you're playing from a completely different edition and they used to hear something totally different, it's not beneficial for you. You want to make sure that you follow what's on the page. Now, if you disagree with them on something, let's say you found a mistake in their list, it's good to ask them. So it goes together with the first thing I said. Stay in touch with them, right? If you find something, if you can't find certain music, ask them, right? There is no reason they don't want you to succeed, right? So they want you to succeed, and you have to stay in touch with them for that. So you got your list, right? You started putting music together. For all the music I play, I prefer to reuse the parts. So I don't print brand new parts every single time I audition for something. I usually keep track, I usually collect all the parts I've practiced with my pencil markings. It's basically you want to keep your markings. For solo rep too. You want to keep the same parts, just because sometimes between the pieces you have a few years. That's like, let's say the first time I played Mozart concerto, I don't remember, it was in high school, right? But I still have the same part for that concerto, and it's surprisingly how helpful it is to have it. So sometimes I don't need those markings that I had, you know, how many years ago, 15 years, I don't know, 10 years ago. But I still use most of those markings. And it's a lot of good information that my teachers told me or I heard somewhere, and I just put it in the music. And I probably forget by now, but when I look at the music, all these memories come back. And that's what I do with my music. I try to keep the same parts, no matter what I play. If I play the piece and I heard something important, I put it in my music. And the next time I play it, I have all this information immediately available in my brain, right? So if you do orchestral auditions, the same thing. They ask for really short excerpts, and it's really easy to reprint them every single time, because sometimes orchestras even send the whole PDF with all the parts, and you just press Command P on your computer, and all of a sudden you have a brand new part. But in reality, that's not the best way to do it. The best way is to keep your old parts, put them together in a folder, and whatever music is required, then you just put them in the correct order. Yeah, but you already use the parts you've been practicing with. That's what I do with my parts. It doesn't matter if it's an orchestral audition or not. Let's see. Also, when I get we will talk about a little bit about later about mock auditions, but what do I usually do? I print a few more copies, at least 2 more copies of all the music I practice, so later I can play these pieces for people, for my friends, for my family, doesn't matter, whoever can read music. So I have 2 more copies of the music available, so you can have it available for your teacher or for your friends. I would just make at least 1 or 2 more copies of each piece that you are practicing or you're preparing. Okay, now I guess that's, what did I write to myself? Okay, so this is more related to orchestral auditions, but there are really specific things that actually make you win an audition. And those few things are, well, number 1 is your sound. The sound of the quality of the sound you play is a number 1 thing. You show up for audition or competition, the first thing they hear is your sound. You know, you play the first note, you start warming up. You said, can I play a few notes before I start playing? Sure. You play a few notes, they hear your sound, right? So it's extremely important to make sure to work on your sound. Make sure if you play a woodwind instrument that you have the best reed of the day or of the week or of the year. If you play a string instrument, you have new strings, or if you prefer to play on a little older strings because they sound more mellow, sure. If you prefer to play on brand new strings because they cut through better and it shows your personality, great. You have enough. You have a bow that's been recently repaired or whatever. You have an instrument that's been recently taken to a repair person because your keys might be louder than your sound is. So you need to make sure that they actually hear the sound of the instrument, not the sound of the keys, or I don't know. So like you have enough rosin on your bow. Those things you need to make sure that you demonstrate the best possible sound during your performance, right? It's a performance. Doesn't matter if it's an audition or or you're auditioning for school or orchestra or you're playing a solo competition. You have to demonstrate your best possible sound. And of course, it's you can relate it with how you play the instrument, but it's also equipment related. You know, you need to make sure that your instrument is in the best shape.
If I could add something too, as far as, you know, these changes that you would make to an instrument or, you know, to your equipment prior to an audition. Like, I'm a trumpet player. Don't show up at an audition and then go in the bathroom and clean out your mouthpiece. Like that's not the time to do it. You know, you don't make any changes to your equipment for a month before an audition. You know, or it depends on the person, but make sure that you have enough time to adjust to whatever changes that you've made, so you know how the instrument plays, or you know what's different now. Because you know you could be really prepared for an audition. You go in the bathroom, you clean out your mouthpiece, and then you crack every other note in your audition. You know, you change something about your setup, and your body is not going to be able to respond to that in that amount of time. So if you are going to make changes, I would suggest doing it you know, well in advance to your audition.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm guilty doing exactly the same thing that you said. It's like I would try to adjust something in my clarinet right before I go on stage, because I would be like, oh no, for some reason I can't start this note on time. It's probably my mouthpiece or the reed, and then I start adjusting the reed. But in reality, it's you know, it's mostly mental when it happens, and you just should trust that all the hard work you put in the preparation is there, and everything is going to be fine. if you start preparing well in advance and you thought about actually, yeah, like cleaning your mouthpiece or making sure that you have a few good reeds for if you play, I don't know, woodwind instrument, or you have if you're playing string instruments, of course, having an extra set of strings in your case, right? Because sometimes strings break, and it doesn't happen too often, but I've encountered a few performances where string players, or a few auditions where string players had to replace their strings. So that happens, you know, the strings break. You have to have a set of strings in your case. The same for woodwind players. I guess you have to have a few extra reeds in your case. Those break too. Happened to me too. Put in a ligature on the mouthpiece, and you know, and the reed, yeah, broke my reed. One time it happens. Now I'm careful with that too. But just to make sure you have a backup. So sound, that covers the sound, right? Sound is a really it's a really personal thing, but of course during when you perform something, you need to make sure that you show the best sound you are capable of currently, right? Now the number two really big thing that that will definitely help you in auditions, and actually is really important, is rhythm. And sometimes we think like, rhythm, what's the big deal about it? Actually, it's, in a way, it's harder than you would think, especially if you perform without an accompaniment. So I remember I played certain pieces in youth orchestra, like we played, I don't know, Tchaikovsky 5, and I was like, okay, I know this piece so well, I don't have to practice it with metronome. Why would I do it? I know exactly how it is. I played it many times. But then the truth is, even if you perform this piece, it's very different when you just play it by yourself. You don't have anyone or any other instruments to rely to. So you have to have a really good internal rhythm to start with. And that's internal rhythm, it's not particularly natural to a lot of people. It's definitely not natural to me. And that's where metronome is very useful. And it's not just to put metronome there to kind of be there on the background and do whatever you want. It's really be precise with that, and practice with metronome, turn it off, and record yourself the same passage. If you record yourself, it's better to record short passages, because if you record an hour of your practicing, the chances are that you'll be listening an hour of your practicing back is probably close to zero. But if you record, okay, I'm working on these 8 measures, and I just recorded 8 measures, took 10 seconds, and I listened back to them, it's much easier to correct mistakes that you might hear in your practicing, right? It's like, oh, I'm late, or I'm too early from this tie, and it happens all the time, right? You cut that note after the tie, or those triplets sound like 16ths, or this, and there are so many things that recording yourself might help right after practicing with metronome. So metronome is definitely a good thing, but you also need to make sure that you can play exactly the same way without metronome too. And that's by removing the metronome and recording yourself and listening back to how you actually sound like. So sound, rhythm, those two. And then the number 3 is intonation. So those 3 things, if you audition for anything, if you are good at those 3 things, you will be at least passing to next rounds, where maybe you will be even winning. So when I talk about intonation, if you play with the piano, it's really easy to hear if you're out of tune. There is no way to hide it. So sometimes I remember when I was doing solo competitions, and all the solo competitions are with piano, I would always ask, what is the tuning for this piano? Is it 440? Is it 442? So you can plan in advance what kind of tuning situation you're in, right? Especially, like, let's say if you're an oboe player, that might be crucial, right? Because you need to make reeds in a certain way to accommodate certain tuning situations. For string players too, string players, at least what I feel from my friends, it's a little bit more comfortable to tune a little bit higher. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it's a little easier to play. The ball bounces better. Doesn't matter. You need to know what tuning situation you're in. So if the piano is tuned 440, you need to know it in advance. If it's tuned 442, it's better to know it in advance so you can actually use the tuner to check on that. If you're playing by yourself, like orchestra audition, it's a little trickier to tell if it's 440 or 442, but it's really easy to tell if the person plays out of tune within himself or herself, right? So in case if you have octaves or fifths or any perfect intervals, and all of a sudden they're really off, that's very easy to hear. So most of the auditions are happening in large rooms or even concert halls. They're boomy. So let's say you finish the phrase and you start the next phrase on the same note, and you started the note out of tune, it will be there, right? So just being aware of your own intonation, especially if you're repeating the same note. Let's say you took a breath and you restarted the note and it's like half a step up, that's not good, right? Or if you played an octave and it's clearly not even close, that's something to be aware of, right? So that's if you play by yourself. If you play with the piano, well, it's important to know what piano is tuned to, because unfortunately, it's impossible for the pianist to move the tuning of the piano, but it's possible for us to adjust. So sound, intonation, rhythm are the three must-have things for auditions. Now, of course, I didn't include musicality or any of this for a reason, because as musicians, I believe that's something that we do naturally, and that's something we want to convey in the music. So of course, add your musical ideas, add your interpretation into the piece. Be creative with how you play it, but don't forget about those three important things that can either help you or actually destroy your audition process. You might say, oh, I played so beautifully, I played so well, but it was not in correct rhythm, and it was out of tune, and the sound got a little off because the reed wasn't fresh enough, or the strings, and that's it. No matter how great of a musical idea you had at the moment, you had your audition time, which is about 10 minutes long, and it's just, in reality, it's not enough just to be musical. You need to be solid with your fundamentals, and those are most important things when you audition for something, or Yeah, or you're taking any sort of competition. Yes.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Stas just said wholeheartedly. It's your sound, and one of the biggest things that I'm listening for when I'm listening to auditions is rhythm, because I know that it's a thing, especially younger students. We did an audition clinic last year to kind of prepare kids for all South Jersey's orchestra, and the number one thing that I found in all those auditions that were the weakest across the board was rhythm. But what rhythm tells us in an audition is if you can play in an ensemble with other people in time, and that's a really, really, really important thing. That's one of the things that makes me feel comfortable, letting you play in an orchestra, if I know you can play the music in time. So that's for me the biggest thing that I hear, or that I listen for. If you miss a note, that's absolutely forgivable. These things happen to everybody. Nobody's perfect, but you can really wow an audition committee by playing with really great rhythm, just in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And um, yeah, that's very true. Actually, when I listen to auditions, that would be probably, yeah, one of the first things that I notice if someone has a good rhythm. It's surprisingly, it feels good to listen to this kind of person. You trust this person better right away. You're just like, okay, I can play with this person.
Definitely.
And you'll be surprised how many people play with a questionable rhythm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also true. And in my experience, it comes from a part where, yes, you used to play with other people in ensembles, and those people help you to create this rhythm. But can you produce the same solid rhythm just by yourself?
Exactly.
That requires practicing. All right. So moving to the next thing is how long in advance you have to start practicing and what should it look like. So I wouldn't recommend to start preparing for anything like a week or two before, even if you played those pieces. So if it depends what you are preparing for. If you're preparing for an orchestral audition, where you have excerpts, I would start preparing about 6 to 8 weeks in advance. And it also depends how well do you know these excerpts, or maybe you've never played those, or maybe maybe you played all of them. Then it can be maybe shorter than 6 weeks. But if a lot of excerpts are new to you, I would start at least 2 months in advance. If it's a solo competition, well, or a school audition, that might require a whole much more time than that, right? Because of course the amount of pieces that you need to learn, the amount of repertoire that you need to go through. So when I auditioned for schools, I started at least half a year before that, right? Just to make sure that I have enough time to prepare those pieces, but also to run those pieces, play them with a pianist, play them by myself, play them for other people. So if it's a school audition, maybe half a year. If it's an orchestral audition, 6 to 8 weeks. And what do you do in this 6 to 8 weeks? You create some sort of routine for yourself. Imagine if you're preparing to run a marathon, and that's pretty much what it is, right? Auditions are, I mean, they're musical auditions, but they're also really athletic in a way, right? You need to be in a good shape, and to be able to get in this good shape, you need to be able to have some sort of routine, right? So every time before you start practicing, you should warm up with the same exact things, right? So you just keep those things same. So what they do, they not only help you to warm up, but they help you to calm down in a way, because you know, okay, that's how I warm up for the last 8 weeks. It feels good. After this warm up, I feel better about my playing. And actually, when you have to go to audition, you play the same warm up, and all of a sudden, all these good habits that you've just been developing for the last 2 months come back to you. And it's a good thing to have a routine. I know a lot of people like to practice in the morning. I always like to practice at night. That was my thing. So thankfully, Curtis had 24/7 practice rooms. So I would start to practice at 11 p.m. Not like I would recommend to anyone to do that, but that was my practice routine. You know, I know that after all the classes are done, then I have my coffee and my dinner, and I start practicing, you know, and I start practicing until I feel like I'm satisfied with what I achieved. But it's something that if you can form some sort of routine in your playing, that's the best thing you can do for your upcoming audition. You know, you playing warm-ups, playing long tones, whatever you do to warm up, and then playing the pieces. Now, how would I approach a large list of pieces? Well, you need to decide what's difficult for you, right? And mark those things down, right? If you play a concerto and there is a passage that's extremely hard, mark that down and make sure that you start practicing the first day you decided to practice, right? So just prioritizing certain things, practice difficult things and easy things. In reality, in ideal situation, of course, you want to practice everything, but you really should focus on what's difficult right away, right at the start, and make sure that nothing is difficult for you at the audition. I remember the worst kind of feeling when you go to an audition and something is unprepared and you're just hoping that they not gonna ask for that. It's like, please just don't ask me this excerpt. And guess what? They always ask that excerpt, because it's not only hard for you, it's hard for everyone else, and they know it, and they'll definitely ask it. So don't try to hide. Don't like, oh, please don't. And yes, they always ask you. Just I'm telling you now, I have experience with that. They will ask you that excerpt. They will ask you that passage of the piece. So start practicing it way in advance. Make sure it's comfortable for you and you can play it the best you can. Also, it boosts your confidence too. You know, you go to an auditions like and say, please ask me that. I know it's the most difficult thing on the list. I've practiced it. Please ask me that. You know, you want to feel that. You want to feel that energy coming out of you. So definitely have a plan. Start practicing all the difficult things right away. Don't wait until the last moment, and especially think that they might not ask it. They will ask it. So that's how I would approach a list. And record yourself as an artist. Record yourself is in small segments. Don't record the whole practice session. I've done it. I would just put a recording device and there's like playing, and then I would think, okay, I would just check on that excerpt, and I couldn't find it because it was like a 2-hour-long session. I mean, I don't remember when I played it. So you want to be able to record yourself and correct right away. Thankfully, we have all our phones, so whatever voice memos or whatever you have on your phones, you don't need the greatest quality of the recording. You need just to have something to listen back really fast, and phones are really helpful for that.
Could I add something quickly?
Yes, please.
So I haven't taken auditions for some time now, but when I was preparing myself, I always tried to break it into, you know, like Stas is saying, 2-month time frame, something like that. But there's always a period of time where you want to spend learning the piece or learning the pieces that you're working on, but you also want to spend time actually performing them too. Because it's not you need to learn the pieces. Obviously, you need to learn all the hard things, and he's exactly right. You have to spend time on the things that are really hard for you. But there comes a point where it's just like, okay, I've learned this, and now I have to start performing it because I'm going to have to perform it in an audition. That period of time really depends on the person. Maybe it's the week before you start performing these excerpts, and maybe that's the best time to start recording them and listening back and saying, okay, well, now how can I fix these things, right? And to one other point, I loved practicing at 11 p.m. It was evening was really like the time when I got the most things done. I don't know why, but you also have to be ready to perform and to play an audition as if you were in your most comfortable time to practice at 8 a.m. You have to be able to feel comfortable at any time during the day, with being able to perform, and that's not the easiest thing. So I would suggest that if you are practicing often at night and that's the time that's really great for you, that's awesome. That was really what worked for me too. But then I would have to go play something at 11 a.m. and it feels different. It's not the same. So you kind of have to vary your practice times as well, just so you're prepared with how your body feels. It's just a different experience depending on the time of day. At least it was for me. And sometimes you pull your number and they say, okay, you're at 11 p.m. That's never going to happen in an audition. But it'll probably be like, okay, you're at 8 a.m. It's like, if I'm going to play the trumpet well at 8 a.m., I'm waking up at like 5 a.m. to feel like I'm a human being by 8 a.m. So you really have to like think about what could happen. And if you are doing the same routine every day, make sure that you have enough time to do that routine when you get to your audition location. If it's a 30-minute thing that you have to do to feel good, make sure you're there at least an hour in advance so you have the time to get through your routine.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for saying that. And just to add a little bit on that. So I mentioned that my audition routine is usually 8 weeks. So the last 2 weeks of those 8 weeks, it's where I'm starting to do what I would start to play for people, and I would start to preparing myself mentally for that audition. So, and that includes, yes, you might need to play at 9 a.m. and for me that's super uncomfortable. Yeah, so I would try to see if I can perform well early in the morning, if I can perform well without much of a warm up. I would have that too. I know it for maybe for brass players it's different, but for well, I don't know. It's actually might be a helpful thing to check anyway. So there are so many times when in audition day I would have to wait so long. They would say, okay, your time slot is this, but then things get late. You don't get a practice room, or you get a practice room with other people playing, which is a nightmare because then you start rethinking your musical ideas. Oh, they play faster than me, or they play slower than me, or they play softer. There is always, or you got a room with someone next door playing, and what happens, it's this door effect. Everyone sounds great behind that door. It's like no matter what, the person behind the door is always sound better than you for some reason. But it's the door. You don't know how they sound. You just hear like half of what they actually sound. Maybe they have a terrible sound, but you only hear that they can play this passage faster than you, and you started freaking out and you started practicing it faster. So sometimes those places where those audition warm-up rooms that they give you during the auditions are not that ideal. So you have to build it in your mental preparation, which happens about 2 weeks before the audition for me. So what would I do? I would ask to play for friends. Mock auditions is number one thing that helped me a lot. So get that list to your friends, ask them to call pieces in random order, see if you can play them. Now, a lot of auditions happen behind the screen. Why not to have a screen? Just put something that separates you and other and your friends over there, and just imagine how it feels to play for a screen. It's the most bizarre thing, because as performers, we never play for a screen. I mean, this is just so unnatural. It's terrible, right? But just having an experience of that really helps. If you're sensitive to, if you feel uncomfortable to wearing different clothes, like if you're uncomfortable wearing a suit jacket or something like that, try to play with that on. I know for a lot of people, we practice in t-shirts, you know, and pajamas, and like over a sudden you need to wear like nice shoes and a suit and a tie, and over a sudden that makes a huge difference. So try to wear your audition clothes. You know, you want to look good during your audition. You want to look like you're about to win this audition. Yeah. So whatever it means for you, if it means like a nice button-down shirt or whatever, that's really helpful.
What's the saying is dress for the job that you want to have. You hear that one?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not saying wear a tuxedo for your audition. You don't have to do that. That's a little overkill. But you know, that's a very good point. To, you know, if you're gonna wear a shirt and tie, like practice with a shirt and tie on, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's pressing the neck here. It's still hard for me to perform with the tie on. Yes.
So practice.
Also, one thing I would add: try to practice in different locations, different rooms. It's surprising how much, I mean, for at least for me, it affects me a lot. So if I play in a small room and the audition is in a giant room or in a hall, you know, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how much sound I should project. So playing, finding different rooms, dry rooms, boomy rooms, and try to play pieces in if you have a house, just play in different rooms in your house. I mean, that really doesn't matter. Just don't stick to the same room and get so used to it, then when you move to a different location, you can't find your sound there. So that's something that I would include in that mental preparation.
Or if you have to choose, then I would choose a room that's dead. You know, choose a room that has carpet on the walls. You know, like something that will make you feel like you sound terrible in. Because once you get into a better space, your sound will be immensely better. You know, so don't always practice in a big, boomy acoustic room, because you might be auditioning in this tiny little room that has a very small sound. You know, so it's much easier to go the other way if you don't have very many options. You should practice in rooms that are dead, because you can really hear mistakes better. You know, bigger rooms, you know, they can kind of hide that a little bit, I feel like.
That's very true. I remember one time I went completely crazy. So I had a walk-in closet in my place. So I practiced in that walk-in closet. It was so dry. You know, the moment the sound comes out of the instrument, it just disappears immediately. It was so difficult, but you know, in a few days I got used to it, and I started using more air through the instrument, and my sound got bigger. So you know, you can benefit as a performer by doing all those things. They're not just to torture you. They're there for you to make you better as a person who takes auditions, or as a musician too. You know, if you know how to play in a dry space, well, your sound is probably really good. You know, when you go to a boomy place, I mean, it's just going to amplify your good sound and make it sound better.
Before I forget, it's now after 5. So if anybody does need to leave, that's okay. Well, you know, this is recorded, so we can provide the video. So if anybody needs to go, please do so. That's totally fine. we'll finish up shortly.
Okay, so just I guess last thing about auditions is if you have to travel to an audition, um, how well in advance to arrive, what to look at. So it depends on how far you need to travel. I remember when I auditioned for Kurdish, and I had to travel from St. Petersburg, from Russia, with a 12-hour plane ride, you know, and then it's like and it's 8-hour difference in time. So you know, I gave myself 5 or 6 days in advance, just so I can get used to the schedule. I can go to bed at this new time and arrive in the morning, instead of just totally being an 8 hours difference where I can't sleep, or during the day I want to sleep. You know, if you travel within one country, there are other things to consider too. Let's say if you're taking an audition in Colorado and the altitude is so high and you play a woodwind instrument, well, it doesn't matter, you can play string instrument, it's still, you will feel that deficiency of oxygen. You will feel tired. If you play woodwind instruments, it's whole another level of terrible, because all your reeds will go crazy. Everything goes crazy. So for those extreme places, I would take also at least 5 or 6 days to arrive. If it's in your hometown, great. If it's in nearby state, like I took some auditions in New York, and if they're in the evening, I would just I would just go there the same day, you know, if it's just an hour train ride. If you need to fly somewhere, I would take at least 1 day before, or even 2 days better. So you want to make sure that you feel comfortable in this new environment, new weather conditions. If you play reed instrument, reeds, of course, go crazy always after a flight. You know, string instruments too. String instruments can be quite moody with different weather changes. So at least give yourself 2 days for an easier trip, and 5 to 6 days for a longer trip. Make sure to stay in a decent place. I've heard many bad stories, people staying in cheap places, and then they you know, all these motels, and it's loud at night, people make a lot of noise, they can't get rested before the audition. Or some motels still allow cigarette smoking. So if you're allergic to that, I've had a friend who had an allergy to that, and the neighbor next door smoked, and then he had a terrible audition experience next day. So make sure that the place itself is decent. It's after all the work you've done to prepare for the audition, that's at least you can do for yourself, is to treat yourself nicely, eat well, make sure you're well rested, make sure you stay in a comfortable place. If it's a decent hotel, I would usually ask them for a conference room to warm up and practice, so I can get a big room, and they're usually really nice about that. If they have a room available, they would say, sure, please, you know, you can use it in the morning. It's better for our neighbors too, you know, if you don't play trumpet like at 8 o'clock in the morning. People would probably appreciate if you do it in a conference space, and it's a better space for you anyway to warm up. So those little things to think about. I know they're tiny things compared to the whole audition preparation, but you want to be comfortable right before you're about to perform, and spending a little bit more money on a hotel goes a long way. I tried both ways, and I should say I usually regret if I stay in a place that that it's not nice. It's usually just all the time that you spend preparing goes to nothing because you just can't rest, you can't focus, and yeah, you know, it's, and it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, so one thing I would add, actually, you mentioned Colorado. I remember going to the Aspen Music Festival one year, and if you are auditioning at a place like this with an elevation that is many thousands of feet higher than you are normally used to being in, it makes a huge difference in everything. I mean, I'm a trumpet player, and I know that wind instruments, reed instruments, and string instruments are very affected by the altitude, but it's also your body is affected by the altitude. I remember feeling like 5 or 6 days in, like there was no water left in my body. Like I couldn't drink enough water to stay hydrated. Your lips start cracking. You can't make any sound. I mean, that's a place where you just really need to be prepared for changes in your physiology. I mean, that was like a real eye-opening thing. Like I'd never even imagined it being an issue. I can, audition day comes and I can't even make sound. My lips won't buzz because I feel like there's no water in my body. Like it's just so interesting because mountain weather, everything evaporates so quickly, and I feel like that's what happens inside your body too. So if you ever are going to audition or even go play at a place like that, that's just something to be hyper aware of. I mean, if you're coming from Philadelphia and you're going to go audition at UCLA and they're almost sea level, you're not going to really feel a whole lot of change in your body, or probably not your instrument. But when you're talking about extreme changes in elevation like that, you will really feel very different. I feel like my playing changed like overnight. Like when I came home from that festival, like my sound got so much bigger because you have to work a lot harder to use more air. I mean, the air is thinner up there, so that was just something that I never even thought of until I got there, and I was like, wow, this is a challenging place to learn music for 9 weeks. So it was that was just like eye-opening for me. So like it just so people are aware, like it's a real thing. Elevation is something not to mess around with.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's all I have to say. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask right now. I bet I didn't cover some of the things, and I guess would it be a good time for questions?
Sure. Yeah. If anybody
Yeah.
has any questions, please. Stas is he's a real pro, so I mean, ask away.
I have a question.
Sure. What's up?
Yes.
My name is Chris. I'm a trumpet player as well. I wanted to ask, like, what aided you in getting into a more, like, what kind of told you what was comfortable for what you wanted in an orchestra? Like, there are some people have like different tastes. Different. Some people just don't feel well in certain places. What kind of helped you get the mindset of like, this is where I want to be? For like orchestra or college or whatever it may be.
Oh, I see. Well, for me, it was if you are talking about schools, for me, a comfortable place to study would be where a good teacher is. So for me, having a really good teacher was total priority. Donald Montanaro, or Mr. Montanaro, how I called him during school, he had this sound that I wanted to have this sound. I needed to have this sound. So it was no question for me about Philadelphia or about anything else. I just wanted to study with this person, and that's how I picked the school. I mean, I honestly when I was in Russia, I didn't know about Curtis. I knew about Mr. Montanaro and his playing because of Philadelphia Orchestra, um, and I wanted to study with him really badly. So so that's how it is. And actually, with Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, where I'm here right now, so our music director, Miguel Hart-Bedoya, he came to conduct Curtis Orchestra when I was a student there. And we played, what did we play? We played something with a lot of clarinet solos. And I remember I was so just impressed by his musicianship and the way he worked with the orchestra. And when this orchestra had a clarinet opening, I was like, yes, I have to take it. I have to try it because I really enjoy working with this musician. So sometimes it's not the place that I'm looking for, is the people. So for me, people make the place. It's the teacher or the conductor or your friends around. So I would look for that. And if you can get better as a musician, if you can get a really good experience being in certain places, yes, absolutely, I would totally consider applying for those.
Yeah, that's all really, really great advice. And if I can add to it a little bit. So if you're auditioning for trumpet for colleges, you got to think about a couple of different things. You should have, probably a tier of schools. Curtis is like the top of the top. 1% of people that audition there get in. So that's one of the hardest schools in the country to get into. So you really have to tier it. If Curtis is it, then you got to say, I'm going to work really hard to get there. But you also kind of need like middle tier schools. That somewhere like Temple University is a very good school with good teachers, good facilities. There's also, and you should also think about maybe like a safety school. Somewhere where you feel like maybe is local, somewhere that you feel like you could get into with a really good audition, somewhere that you would be very confident about. So you should have maybe 3 tiers, like a safety school where you feel like, okay, I can get into this school with my best audition, middle tier that are a little bit more of a reach, and then like your top place where you're like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to get in, I'm going to play my best and hope for the best. So that's one thing. Second, I really feel like following a teacher or looking at somebody kind of to find a mentor is a really important piece of this too. Like for me, Ray Mace is one of my favorite trumpet players, and that was one of the reasons why I went to the Aspen Music Festival, because I knew that he was going to be teaching there. So and again, it was just exactly what Stas said. I just had in my head that this is exactly what I want, and I'm just going to get it. And fortunately, my daughter's saying hi. But fortunately, I got into the Aspen Music Festival for that, and I got to study with Ray Mace, and that was a great experience. One, I'll be right up. So one thing that was really important to me to get out of that experience was, sorry. Go upstairs. All right. So one thing that was really important to me about studying with Ray, and one thing that I learned, I was trying to figure out where to do a master's degree. And I was like, oh, I don't really know where, anywhere. I just want to, maybe I'll go to UCLA. He was like, well, why? I was like, I don't know. There's a great teacher out there. It seems like a good school. He was like, well, what are you going to do after you're done at UCLA? I was like, I don't know, come back here to the East Coast. He was like, if I could offer any advice that would be helpful, it would probably be to set up in a place where you feel like if you're not looking to move all over the country or the world to play auditions and win a job somewhere, go to school somewhere where you can set up a base. And when you're finished with school, then you'll have a whole bunch of connections with people from that area that you could get hired for gigs, hired for jobs, job opportunities. The more people that you know in an area, the better you'll be able to get set up. I moved down to Philadelphia because my wife is a nurse manager at the Children's Hospital, but for a solid 2 years, it was a struggle in this field to just make contacts, to get to know people. So if I had gone to school in Philadelphia or in this area, I would have known a lot more people to get set up. Do you know what I mean? That's that's the best advice I can give you about a school to pick. There should be a couple of different criteria. Figure out what the most important things are to you, but also think practically about it too. If you want to be an orchestral musician, then you have to be willing to do a fair bit of traveling. It's part of the gig. You know, you're flying all over the country trying to win a job. You know, and there's a lot of other people doing the same thing. So if you want to do a lot of traveling, maybe that's the right thing for you. If you want to be in one place, make your plan to be, for that to be your outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually helped me a lot. I was planning on going to like I was like going to go to like Susquehanna, Oberlin, and probably move down to like Florida or something. But then that kind of helped me because now I know I have to like go somewhere in Florida to get my contacts, so that way when I move down there, I won't have so much of a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, wherever you go to school, you're going to get to know your teacher. You're going to get to know a lot of the people that are in the studio with you, the other instrumentalists in the program. And, just knowing the right person could wind you up with an easy job. You know, like John Fowler, he was the tubist in Symphony in C for a long time. He happened to go to school with me at Rutgers and got to know one of the conducting fellows that went there, and the timing worked out perfectly. And the tuba teacher was retiring from Westchester University, and he slid right in there because he just knew the right person. You know, so it's obviously important to be a great, as good a musician as you can be, but it's almost just as important to know the right people in the field, because they can connect you to other people that will help you get to where you want to go. That was always some of the best advice I heard from a couple of different teachers, and it's paid off because I wanted to be in this area, which is a very I guess competitive area for arts. You know, great musicians that are in the New York, Philly, DC, Baltimore area. And a lot more musicians than there are jobs. So you have to be smart about your connections. I think that's really a smart part that a lot of people don't think about. But if you can think about it that way, as well as musically and artistically, I think you could be a step ahead. All right, we went over time, but I think it was all valuable information.
Yeah.
But,
thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Stas. We really appreciate you joining us from Fort Worth. And I'm going to share this video with the whole camp for anybody that wasn't able to come. Christopher, thanks for hanging around a little late and for asking some really important questions, which I bet there are a lot of other people that are going to want answers to that too.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, any other questions?
No, you actually answered more questions than I thought.
Oh, good. I even made up questions for you to
Great.
I'm good at that. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
All right.
Thank
You too. Have a good night.